it's William Bell. I want to welcome you back to our All Things Fulfilled channel. This is where we are discussing 2 Peter chapter 3, and particularly we're discussing 2 Peter 3 and verse 7 on the end of heaven and earth. And this is a continuation of the points introduced in the previous video where we were talking about 1 Peter 1 verses 24 and 25 and heaven and earth. So in this video, we're going to talk about Isaiah chapter 40, verses 7 and 8 particularly, but I'm going to lay the context for that so that you can see how we're tying it together. Now remember, I pointed out that there was a contrast in 1 Peter chapter 1 verses 24 and 25. In other words, we made it very clear that in 1 Peter chapter 1 verse 24, Peter said that all flesh was as grass, and the flower of the grass falls, fades away, and therefore was that which did not continue. On the other hand, he says, but the word of the Lord endures forever, and this is the word which by the gospel is preached to you. We also pointed out it was the seed, the incorruptible word of God. So there you have these two contrasts between something that continues forever and something that does not continue. And I suggested to you, according to the scriptures, that is Peter's way of saying heaven and earth would pass away, but the word of God would not pass away. And that's a direct quote from Matthew 24 and verse 35. For example, when you look in Matthew 24, as we said, heaven and earth would pass away. That's verse 35, but the word of God would not pass away. So you can see the harmony between the two passages. The word of God in both texts would never pass away. But in one text, he says, all flesh is as grass. And then the other, he says, heaven and earth would pass away. So that's why I'm suggesting to you that you put those two things together, because they stand in opposition to, or they stand antithetical, opposite to that which does not pass away. All flesh is as grass, heaven and earth. My word shall not pass away. So things equal to the same thing are equal to each other. Heaven and earth would pass away. All flesh is as grass. The grass withers and falls away like the flower falls away. That's equal to the heaven and earth because they both pass, whereas the word of God, the incorruptible seed, the gospel, never passes away. Now, let's give you the context where that's found in in Isaiah. When we turn to Isaiah chapter 40, the text says, comfort, yes, comfort my people, says your God. Speak comfort to Jerusalem and cry out to her. Now make sure that you subscribe to this channel because you don't want to miss these videos. Just hit that red button, subscribe. That way you'll get every video in the playlist. So if you miss something, you don't have to worry about it. You'll get it. He says that her warfare is ended. So this is a context about warfare. Then he says that her iniquity is pardoned, for she has received from the Lord's hand double for all her sins. The doubling for all their sins, if you turn to Revelation 18, and I'm not going to spend the time to go there, but you can do that in your leisure, and you will see where the great city, the harlot, received double for her sins. That's a reference to Jerusalem, and that's why the text is saying here, speak comfort to Jerusalem, because those who believed would be comforted, but those who rejected Christ would be destroyed. And that's the context. So it's a context of war and devastation, as well as for salvation. Then he says, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make straight in the desert a highway for our God. Every valley shall be exalted, and every mountain and hill brought low. The crooked places shall be made straight, and the rough places smooth. The glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken it. Now, when he talks about leveling out the valleys, okay, the low places, and then making straight the crooked places, and then leveling out the mountains, this is terminology that is used for a nation that is about to conquer another nation, because they have to have access through roads where their army can travel, all right, and their animals and everything else. And as a result, this is what John the Baptist was doing. He was making a way for the Lord to come, not just in his first coming, but also in his second coming. And that's what this language is about. And that's why it talks about warfare, because the Lord is going to send his army to destroy Jerusalem and at the same time save those, the salvation of those would occur who believed in him. Now, look at the next verse, verse or the next phrase. He says, all flesh is grass. Well, isn't that what Peter said in 1 Peter 1, 24 and 25? All flesh is grass, and all its loveliness is like the flower of the field. The grass withers, the flower fades, because the breath of the Lord blows upon it. In other words, here is God blowing upon the grass. That's the judgment coming from God. Remember texts like he will destroy them with the breath of his mouth? All right. And so here's the Lord blowing on the heaven and earth, blowing on the grass, and it's being destroyed. Now watch the rest of the text. Surely the people are grass. Remember I said in the previous video that grass was figurative? Now he's telling you precisely what the grass is. Surely the people is grass. Now he's not talking about all people. This was a prophecy related to the destruction of Jerusalem, to the nation of Israel. Surely the people is grass. So the prophecy relates directly to them first and foremost. Then he says, surely the people are grass, the grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God stands forever. Isn't that the very same contrast used in 1 Peter 1, 24 and 25? You see, Jesus and Peter were quoting from the same text in Isaiah. Jesus quoted it in Matthew 24:35, but he used different language to say the same thing. Peter almost used the exact same identical language, and in most cases he did. And therefore, this is where they're drawing the language from. All flesh is grass, and the flower, as the glory of the grass, fades away and withers and dies. Why? Because the breath of the Lord blows upon it. So that's the destruction that Peter is talking about in his first epistle. But he says, I'm reminding you in the first epistle, or in my second epistle, what I already told you in the second. That's why he uses the language of heaven and earth being destroyed, because he's talking about these ungodly people who rejected Jesus Christ, like the scoffers, as we said before, and other unbelieving Jews. And therefore, he was bringing about destruction upon them, which he did in 70 AD when he destroyed that temple. That was the end of Torah. That was the end of the Levitical priesthood. That was the destruction of the temple. That was the end of the old covenant system. That's what he's talking about. Now, we have another text that I want to bring in, and we're going to look at that text, and then we're going to wrap up this video because it ties all of them together. And this text is in Isaiah 51, verses 6 through 8. Isaiah 51, verses 6 through 8. Now, let's notice again the same contrast, the same language, and we'll see how it's all tied together. In verse 6 of Isaiah 51, he says, lift up your eyes to the heavens and look on the earth beneath, for the heavens will vanish away like smoke. The earth will grow old like a garment. You find that language in Hebrews 1:10 through 12 as well. And he says, and those who dwell in it will die in like manner. So when you're talking about the perishing of heaven and earth, you're also talking about the perishing of the people who were a part of that covenant, because he says the heavens will vanish away. That's something that passes away like smoke. And the earth will grow old like a garment, something that you throw away when it's old and ragged and torn. And he says, and those who dwell in it will die in like manner. So that's the end of the people, along with the old covenant system and temple. Then he says, but my righteousness, or but my salvation, will be forever, and my righteousness will not be abolished. That's the exact, precise language terminology used in 1 Peter 1, 24 and 25. The incorruptible seed will never pass away. The word of God, which is the gospel, will never pass away, but the flesh or the grass and the flower of the grass will fade away. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. The heavens will vanish away like smoke, the earth will grow like a garment, and those who dwell in it will die in like manner. but my salvation will never, or will be forever, and my righteousness will not be abolished. Now watch. In verse 7, listen to me, you who know righteousness, you people in whose heart is my law. Do not fear the reproach of men. So these are those who have accepted the gospel. He says, do not fear the reproach of men, nor be afraid of their insults, because Christians were being persecuted. There were scoffers who had come mocking them, like those in 2 Peter 3, and he tells them, don't be afraid of them. He says, for the moth will eat them up like a garment. Notice, the moth eats the people up like a garment, but in the previous verse, it said the moth was going to eat up the earth like a garment. Can you see the correlation there? That shouldn't be hard for a discerning person. Then he says, and the worm will eat them like wool, but my salvation, see, that's a repeat. But my righteousness will be forever, and my salvation from generation to generation. Well, doesn't that tell you that the generations are going to keep coming and going after the heaven and earth has passed? That can't be the physical destruction of the universe. This is what is very important, and it's something that needs to be recognized when we're talking about this subject. And so, he's telling you very clearly that it is the people that were being destroyed. And so in that connection, we're going to stop there, and we're going to come back in the next video, and then I'm going to talk about two terms that are used by Peter in the context that even further support and solidify this concept of the heaven and earth being the Jewish temple, the old covenant system, and the people of that covenant who were ungodly, who rejected Jesus Christ, contrasted with the gospel, which is the word of Christianity that continues forever. Again, I want to thank you for watching this video. Tune in by subscribing to the channel so that you don't miss the videos. I'm breaking this down so that you can see very clearly how we arrive at the conclusions that we do, giving you book, chapter, and verse to support all of it. Leave us a comment or a question if you're unclear about some things. We've probably answered that question in the previous videos, and we're certainly going to answer more questions in the upcoming videos. So make sure you watch all of them so you have a good, clear understanding of what this text is all about. And then visit our website at www.allthingsfulfilled.com. So subscribe, leave us a comment, share this message with your friends. I'm William Bell with All Things Fulfilled. I'll see you in the next video.